those of you who are watching this, welcome to another edition of Guy in the Garage talking about a movie. Now, I picked Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. I found it rather appropriate. Not only is it a movie that I really enjoy, and I'll get into that in a second, but also the main character, L.B. Jeffries, is stuck in his apartment, something that many people can relate to. So while L.B. Jeffries is stuck in an apartment for a different reason, in this case, he's got a broken leg and is in a wheelchair, and it's 1954. So, ramps and elevators in New York City may not be all that commonplace in apartments, probably retrofitted later on down the road. In fact, you'll see in this movie that one of the neighbors actually moves her dog up and down by running a basket with a rope over a pulley and down to the ground. So the dog can go take care of its business, hop back in the basket, and get pulled back up. So again, it's a setting of the times. Now, this has been remade a couple of times. Notably, was remade in the mid-90s by Christopher Reeve. As you know, Christopher Reeve, who really was famous for playing Superman, in a equestrian accident, broke his neck, was paralyzed, and it was a good vehicle for him to showcase that, hey, guess what? I can still act. By the way, for those of you who are thinking about that as well, there's a group called Cinemability, which is to encourage other filmmakers to use those with actual disabilities in their productions rather than casting people who are able-bodied in those roles. Anyhow, let's talk about this a little bit. Now, this is a very interesting film. We'll go into this in a little bit. Like I said, I picked it because it's something that I think we could all relate to. L.B. Jeffries, played by James Stewart, is stuck in his apartment. Can't go anywhere. He is dependent on his healthcare nurse to come in and help. His girlfriend, who it's pretty clear wants to be more, would like to be fiance than wife, and of course a friend, as well as his editor. Jeff is a photographer for a magazine, so the fact that he goes out, hits all these spots all around the world, as evidenced by the photographs in the background, he's going stir crazy being stuck. So he is spending his time in his wheelchair looking out his rear window. And what he happens to see are, well, some interesting neighbors. He has given them all nicknames. There's the Newlyweds, there's Miss Lonely Hearts, there's Ms. Torso, and we'll talk about Ms. Torso in a second. The set is rather interesting. It looks like it would be rather simple, but Hitchcock actually made them go and do a lot of detail, spending an exorbitant amount of money for a set. Back in the early 50s, they spent nearly $100,000 to build this set. In fact, there's 31 apartments that are seen throughout the movie, of which between 8 and 11 of those actually are fully functioning. In fact, Miss Torso, played by Georgine Darcy, spent her downtime between her scenes in her apartment. Had running water, had electricity, so why not? Besides, when there was the call, they knew where to find her. So that was among the very interesting pieces of this. So it looks simple, but actually quite complex, because they wanted to really show the amount of action that one could witness from a stable, still position. So filming this was interesting. They built that set in order to do so, they had to tear out the storage area underneath the studio so they could have a ground level and a more elevated position. So it was, like I said, a big spend on this production. Now, I was introduced to this film, shocker, by actually in a film class. My first of 3 attempts at college, I was in a film class, and we spent a whole lot talking about Hitchcock. I mean, he's one of the true masters of filmmaking, not just in suspense, but in filmmaking in general. So knowing that we're going to talk about, let's go over some of his other films. I mean, people notably will bring up Psycho. Okay. Rear Window, North by Northwest, 2 of my favorites. Psycho, interesting, very well executed film production. But again, I wouldn't call it one of my favorites. North by Northwest, starring Cary Grant, very kind of the opposite of Rear Window. A lot of very good action sequences throughout the film. So that makes it very different. But Hitchcock, to the uninformed, people thought of him as a horror director. No, definitely not. He was definitely the master of suspense, and that is what he was best known for. In this film, a lot of suspense. I'm not going to, for those of you who have not seen it, I'm not going to ruin it for you. Now, of course, the cast includes James Stewart, still a very good Hollywood draw. He started off really back in the 30s and took a little time off for this thing called the Second World War. For those who don't know, he spent a lot of time in the Army Air Corps, later in the either Air Force Reserve or California Air National Guard. By the time he retired from the National Guard, he actually achieved the rank of Major General. Interesting side note to that story is once upon a time, he was somewhere where he was introduced as a Major General, and then I think still governor, I don't think he was president at the time, Ronald Reagan corrected the speaker and said, no, Lieutenant General. And Stewart just kind of sat back and smiled. Later, when Reagan found out that he was wrong in his correction, he went to Stewart and said, Jimmy, why didn't you correct me? He goes, Ronnie, because it just felt so good. Difference between a 2-star and a 3-star. Grace Kelly. They were actually against casting her in this film. They didn't think that she was a good fit with James Stewart, that she was indeed, way too beautiful to be with James Stewart. People in the studio were like, he's the age difference. And Grace Kelly actually told several people that she found him to be one of the most handsome men in all of Hollywood. So in her eyes, she had no problem with it. Of course, for those who don't know, she did a few more films after this and then became a princess. Yeah. Not a bad way to, give up your career. And then Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr plays I won't go into, for those who haven't seen it, I won't go into too much detail, but Hitchcock actually cast Raymond Burr for one main reason. Now, Raymond Burr later became best known for 2 characters on television, of course, Perry Mason and later Ironside. Now, both, of course, more protagonists. This case, he was more of the, definitely the antagonist. Now, the reason why he was cast in this role was because Hitchcock said that a studio head producer, David O. Selznick, was kind of a thorn in his side. And he said that Burr could be easily transformed into looking like David O. Selznick. So it was just a really good fit. So I fast forward to about 15 minutes, 45 seconds into the film, where you see the view that Jeff is having from his apartment. Those are the newlyweds. There's his nurse, played by Thelma Ritter. Now this is a good opening setup scene that shows really not an opening, but a setup scene that shows really the layout of the different apartments that you see in his complex across the courtyard. One of the other actors in this plays a songwriter. I'm going to mispronounce his name, I'm sure. Ross Bogosian, the band behind Alfred and the Chipmunks.
How's your leg? It hurts a little.
Jeff being awakened by his girlfriend.
There's a football.
I would say many people from the 1950s on
You know that?
would
Not too active.
like to wake up with
Anything else?
Grace Kelly coming in for a kiss.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, great film that I strongly recommend. One of the main collaborators that Hitchcock had, he used a lot of the same people throughout his career because he knew their style. He and Stewart had an interesting relationship. He could say something to Stewart, and Stewart would take it as a direction for later on in the film. And other people would be like, what was that all about? Those two knew what was going on, and it worked for them. Franz Waxman was the composer, score writer, did the music for the film. He worked a lot with Hitchcock throughout his career. This was his last collaboration with him. Another film that I'll be doing in the future, when I get back to doing a few more military-based films, is Mr. Roberts, where he also did the scoring for that film as well. So strongly recommend this. I think we can all feel, we can all relate to it because of the, being stuck in one place. So thank you all for watching. I'm not going to ruin the ending for it. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, available through a few different streaming sources. But again, one of my favorites, probably one of the two. It kind of goes back and forth in my mood. Is it North by Northwest or is it Rear Window as far as my my Hitchcock film enjoyment? Again, if you're not a fan of Hitchcock, I understand, but he was a heck of an innovator in filmmaking. So wanted to at least include one of his films in this. All right, got some comments here. That's funny. Laura just watched it the other day. Scott's online. Matt, again, strongly recommend it. All right. Final thoughts as usual. Number one, stay safe, stay healthy. Number two, take care of yourself and those closest to you. All the best.